Hi, my name is Darren and welcome to my channel once again, where we talk about social political issues. It could be anything that we talk about. And if you go through my channel, you'll realize that I actually do political analysis on quite a number of things, especially in East Africa, but also, talk about health things. I host a show called The Urban Doctor. I'm also a radio presenter, so I spend my time creating content most of the times. But today I want to talk about the African continent, this beautiful African continent that we're celebrating the Africa Day the other day. And I was asking myself quite a number of questions, whether it is worthy to celebrate 60 years of AU, which formerly was the OAU, or it's just a moment to sit down and, fold our hands and try to count, are we doing the right thing as the African continent? What have we achieved and where are we? And here's my point, and this is where I stand. One is we've actually done less as the African continent in terms of attaining a certain global recognition, but also move our economies like together, African economies to a certain point, like move it from point A to point Z. Okay, can we stop at least at P? And here's why. Some of the reasons why I think, for me, it was not worth celebrating Africa Day is one, Africa is still a very expensive continent for Africans themselves. It even becomes cheaper for an African to live outside Africa. Okay, now I hear you. You could be thinking something that I know you're thinking, but this is what I mean. It is more expensive to go to Kenya compared to going to Dubai. Yet Kenya from Uganda is actually the neighboring country. And going to Dubai is 5 hours, 6 hours, and it becomes cheaper for me to go to Dubai. Why? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Two, why do I need visas to travel within an African country? Like seriously, I need a visa to go to South Africa. I need a visa to go to Nigeria. I need a visa to go to Morocco, Tunisia. I need a visa to go to Liberia. Why? Have you asked yourself such questions? You're on the same continent. Three, we do not have an open trade system on the African continent. What I mean is that if you're producing milk in Uganda, the chances of you taking that milk to Kenya, just the neighboring country, is quite very difficult because you're not allowed to compete with the farmers locally there. Even when you are, in terms of paper, you're still fighting amongst each other. No, block the milk from Uganda and all these kind of things. I cannot freely move from Uganda and go to another country and seek opportunities, employment opportunities, business opportunities, and name it all. But when you compare Africa to other continents like Asia and probably Europe, all you need is one visa, Schengen visa, and then you'll be able to travel to more than 7 countries or 8 countries, and you can seek opportunities in any of those different countries because you share the same goals. There is this EU agreement that people are actually enforcing, which in Africa, what has happened in Africa is that we have different blocks now. You have the Southern Bloc that has formed its own bloc. You have the East African Community Bloc. You have the Western, the ECOWAS bloc, all that side. So like everyone has created their own blocks, but even in the same blocks, people are not even able to fulfill their own mandate of probably paying subscription to the bloc, but also two, it's still difficult to move from one country to another within the bloc. You cannot trade from one country to another because it's very expensive, very stringent. You cannot come from one country to go and work in another, even within the bloc. And that's still on the African continent. Now, if I was going to celebrate 60 years, I'm always looking for, am I able to travel to another country to seek an opportunity, either a business opportunity or an employment opportunity, or just simply move countries to see what I can do in a different country, or even just tourism freely without thinking about things like visa, thinking about things like how expensive it is for me to travel from one end to another, and that I am not going to be disturbed asking me so many questions when I go to a certain country. That's where we are. A very difficult one. 3, we even don't have a network, a transport network that connects the African continent. One day in East Africa, there was a dream to start an East African Airlines. That means the 7 countries would be participating to fund this airline, and that traveling within East Africa would be very cheap because we're using the same airline. That dream remained a dream. Okay, can we start an African airline where I can leave one place to another continent in a very much more convenient way? Rather than if I want to go to Morocco, I have to get out of Uganda, take a flight, go to Doha or Dubai, and then the flight comes back to Africa to go to Morocco. So to travel within Africa, I have to get out of the continent and come back to the continent. And even when I'm coming back home, I have to get out of the continent and come back to the continent. That's how, weird it is. But yeah, that's where we are. So how about we had a train network system where I can choose to take a train from here to South Africa. I can choose to take a cheap flight from here to South Africa or to any other country in Africa. A very bad thing. Can we go to another one? 4, security. Now, what I expect as the AU to be doing is to have all the countries on the continent who subscribe to the AU to be able to provide a standby force to the AU at any one moment, to be able to solve things like 100 and something rebel groups or armed groups in DRC, to be able to deal with things like the terrorism insurgents that happen in Somalia and Mozambique, Boko Haram in Nigeria. Can we solve those insecurity things and also deal with countries or states that always face things like coups? I mean, you've seen Chad, you've seen Burkina Faso, you've seen things that have been happening in Mali. How do we solve such issues? Because what is happening right now is that the regional blocs are the ones trying to solve issues on the continent. When you come to East Africa, there's an East African standby force that is trying to solve issues in DRC, plus money from our donors. Those are people from the West trying to determine on how we approach some of these things. You see what happens in Mozambique. I would expect that the Southern Bloc would actually come up with a standby force to come and solve the issues in Mozambique. What has happened is that there's a relationship between Mozambique and Rwanda, and now Rwanda is the one sending a standby force to Mozambique to solve the issues in that country. Somalia, I mean, it's still, whereas AMISON is there, or now what's changed into, I think, the African mission transition is something in Somalia, MTs, something like that. Trying to solve the issues in Somalia, but you realize that it's majorly funded by the EU and other, powers that be. So the AU has had less to do in solving the issues on African continent in trade, security, free movement of people, and total removal of visas for anybody who wants to travel within the continent. Like the borders are not open to the fellow African people. The funniest thing is the African presidents to stand and commit themselves to creating a peace mission to go to Ukraine to kind of help resolve the issues of Ukraine and Russia. That does not make sense for me. I mean, we have a lot of issues that are on the African continent that need our attention. And what else doesn't make sense is the superpower countries who sit down and then invite the African presidents to go to them and talk business with those powers. And I'm not saying it's such a bad thing. I'm just saying the American president sits down and says, all the 54 African countries or the presidents come to America and let's discuss. And when they go there, they call them to discuss business opportunities and sign deals, trade deals, and all these things. I mean, you saw what happened between America and DRC, where America will have an opportunity to access to minerals, but also provide them with trade opportunities. Yes, it happened. Now, such deals are happening in America because they got all the African presidents who now leave their offices in Africa and board different jets, and go to meet the president of America. Same happens to the president of Turkey, president of the prime minister of India, the president of China, the president of Russia. All these guys have decided to call all African presidents. And amazingly, they all board and go for such summits. But they can't come together to discuss the same business opportunities like African countries to solve these issues on the African continent. No. They would rather send a minister, a representative, a prime minister, a vice president, and all these kind of things. But they will stay home in power and deal with their own issues the way they fit, the way they think they should handle them. So is it worth it to celebrate the Africa Day making 60 years? For me, no, it wasn't. I intended to make this video on the African Day, but I realized, no, I'm not giving it attention to that. But yeah, anyway, that's my thought. That's just what I think as a person who likes to analyze things. And I think that the African leaders have actually let us down as the African people, that we don't even enjoy our continent the way we want to enjoy it. I think the biggest thing we enjoy about our continent is the weather, and we have amazing beaches, and these are the things, tourism things that we enjoy. But we don't enjoy things like freedom of movement from one country to another, free labor movement, trade movement, very expensive to move around this continent, and insecurity. We just don't enjoy that. If we can solve that, then Africa Day is worth celebrating. See you next time. You can subscribe.